I'm Bandy, the CMO here at Alchemer. Thanks for joining us for the business of feedback, where we dive into, well, all things feedback, right? We're really fortunate to have more than 14,000 global customers running feedback programs, everything from customer experience, employee engagement, really you name it, and we're probably involved in their feedback program. Joining me today is Ryan Tamminga, the SVP of Product and Services here at Alchemer, and no one's closer to, customer feedback than you, Ryan, right? I mean, your teams are talking with our customers every day. You guys really have a pulse on what's happening, and because we have so many customers, right, you guys are seeing the trends really before they're trends. Here we are, the start of Q4, but let's be real, like we're all thinking about what's coming next year. So I thought today we would talk about what you think the kind of trends and predictions are for next year.
Perfect.
So one of the things I know we've talked a little bit about is this concept of kind of the value of CX and the total cost of ownership and how those things sort of relate. So maybe with that, how do you think companies are going to be evaluating their customer experience programs going into 2025 and then through the year?
So I think if we look back over the last year, we've seen a lot of change in the economy. We've seen change in buyer behaviors. We've seen change in the way companies are spending money. I think everyone knows that people have tightened up a little bit. And all of that really requires organizations to really think about how they're spending their money and where they're deploying their resources to best drive where they want their business to go. All of that has kind of shaped an interesting perspective on CX in terms of, you've had this 4 or 5 year journey where we've all gone through COVID, everything has shifted to this digital transformation, everyone's focusing on an evolution of customer experience to match what's happening in the world. Everyone comes out of COVID, the economy kind of goes where it is. And I think the spend that was there before has been evaluated. And what it's focused a lot of organizations on is making sure that you are spending, what you're spending on CX is driving the value of what you expect. And so I think what we'll see in 25 is a continued focus on the value your programs are driving for your business, the ability of your CX programs to adapt to an evolving world. So, how are those implementations evolving over time? And then ultimately what that's going to lead to is a broader conversation about what that return on investment is of your CX program to not only the improvement that you're making with your customers and what they expect from you, from your products and services, but also, being a good partner with your FP&A and CFO organizations where, you've got to balance the experience improvements with what that's going to do to the bottom line of the business.
Love that. Even here, right, we're thinking about like what's the ROI on the program because, well, let's face it, CX isn't free, right? You have platform costs and you've got people costs. And so as companies look to evaluate kind of what is that total cost of ownership, and they're looking at, implementation, like, I don't know, all those costs, right? They go into like getting ROI on the program. There's a lot that goes into that, I guess, TCO concept. So when you think about the total cost of a CX program, like what are the things you're considering and thinking about?
Well, I think the two easiest ones are obviously like you mentioned, right? It's the cost of the software to drive your program. So the technology and the tools that you're using to capture the feedback, analyze it, make sense of that data. There's the teams that are involved in it, the people force that drives a lot of these strategic initiatives. But I think the thing that sometimes gets overlooked is what it takes to actually evolve these programs. So depending on the complexity that's built into the existing program or maybe the initial launch of a program, as things change, those programs need to evolve, and that requires changes to your technology, changes to your organization from a people perspective. Maybe it's requiring a broader view of who's involved in those CX conversations. And all of that is expensive, not only from a cash perspective, but probably more important from a resource time perspective. And, I think as the world as the world tightens up from an economic perspective, there's lots of things to focus your time and energy on from a business perspective.
Yeah.
People can focus on profitability versus growth. They can drive that through lots of means that may not necessarily be frontline customer facing. And I think the challenge that our CX practitioners are facing when it comes to driving ROI and really being able to articulate that total cost of ownership of these programs is you're doing it now against maybe an inventory management project or a supply chain project, or you're doing it against, should we focus more on CX or should we focus more on demand generation from a marketing perspective? And so every dollar is now being evaluated in terms of where's the best deployment of that resource to drive the outcome that business is expecting. And so the focus of really understanding what your total cost of ownership is across kind of those three fronts at least gives you an equal footing so that you can articulate what it's going to take to get where you want to go.
I love that. So I'm hearing what might also be a shift going into 25, because I've heard you mentioned the CFO, you mentioned the people involved are changing. So tell me, like, are we going to see a change there? Like, what's that going to look like? Are we going to see the CFO more and more?
I think so. I think it's all cyclical, right? When things are great and the economy's going great, it's easy to be a little bit more loose with how you're evaluating your budgets and how you're evaluating the spend of time and money and resource. When things rotate into a more constrained time period, obviously people are being much more critical over that spend and over how we're allocating time and energy. Both ends of that spectrum require some rotation in and out, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing this year that the CFOs in our organizations are actively involved in the decisions that are being made around CX and CX programs. And I don't think that's going to immediately shift overnight as the interest rates are coming down and the economy's opening up a little bit. I think people are still going to continue to have that lens of intensity of focus on the spend. Mm-hmm. And so, I think we'll see another year or two where we're going to have to justify why we're doing what we're doing in terms of what it's doing for the business and what the value is to our customers.
So I'm going to maybe put you on the spot a little bit, because I know for a lot of our customers that are running these customer experience or employee engagement programs day in and day out, they're not the CMO, right? They don't often have experience sitting with a CFO, right? And like trying to justify the value of their investments and their work. Any like tip or recommendation you would give them on how to approach that conversation or what to think about as they plan for what they're going to do in 25?
I think,
because I'll elaborate a little more. Like, is showing an improvement in your NPS going to secure your budgets for the future?
I'd probably start with to what end, right? And that's going to be dependent on where you are within the maturity of your CX program within your organization. I know we have customers out there who can directly attribute a specific fix to a specific business process, to a specific metric, and they can drive that. Yeah. That's pretty sophisticated. Yeah. We also have organizations that are just getting started because they know that they need to better engage their customers. And so I think the thing that I would encourage people to think about is, as you're capturing feedback from your customers and you're evaluating what they're asking you to go do, start to think about to what end does it impact the business, right? Like I think it's very clear when we look at a customer, you ask a customer a question, they tell you an answer, they're giving you specific direction on things you need to improve. And obviously doing that is very, very important because it's going to keep them in the boat. And there's obviously a representation of who that customer is as a sample of the market, and you can go use that to go do marketing or other kind of activity there. But again, I think what we as CX practitioners need to continue to challenge ourselves on is, one, do we understand what that outcome of the business is? What's the metric that's going to drive we do these improvements? And if we don't directly understand that construct, who can we work with in the business? I mean, the same way that I think, we've seen a huge change in the last 2 years of, people who are owning a customer experience, who are capturing this feedback data, becoming stewards of that experience across their business, right? Like you may ask for feedback inside of a mobile application. And what you're looking for is, do our customers like the experience that they're being provided with that mobile or that digital experience? But what they're going to tell you is a lot about what they're experiencing through that application, right? So if you think about, mobile ordering for a quick service restaurant, you're going to get feedback on whether or not you can, add a discount code at the end of your transaction. But they're also going to share things about the food that they did pick up.
The fries weren't warm enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think our industry has gotten better at understanding that they can't be siloed when it comes to that data, and they've got to start to think about, how do I share this data with the other aspects of our business that can get value out of that information? And so we've got to take that same lens and we've got to pivot back into the business and go, how do I become a good steward of the outcomes that I can go accomplish by engaging this customer feedback? And so that could mean, building a better relationship with your FP&A partner, or knowing who they are and getting them involved in the conversation. I think in the, especially in my time in consulting, I don't think I've ever met an FP&A team that doesn't want to get more involved with what the business is doing.
Yeah, it's true.
And they're there to help. And so what I would encourage everyone is to take that first step and bring them into those conversations, because they can help you model and figure out what that looks like, and set that direction so that you've got kind of a framework that you can think about as you think about your next project or your next kind of experience you want to.
I will say, I just love you reframing FP&A as a partner versus the enemy, right? Because I think a lot of folks often think of them as, they're just here to cut costs, right? Tell me no. I would love to go more and more into the concept of CX to business outcomes, but I think we have other predictions. So we'll come back to that on another episode. I'm going to pivot us. One of the things that we've invested a lot in the technology this year has been around integrations, and that's not just because we love the idea of connecting to other systems, but it's because our customers have demanded this. To your point of getting the data that can be used across the business to make a change, we've seen integrations play an important role in that. And it's not just us, right? I think across industries, across business departments, this sort of accessible and open data is becoming a more and more common trend. So tell me, is that going to continue going into 25? Are we going to see more widespread integrations, not just within our platform, but across the CX space? And what do you think integrations will look like?
The world of kind of business operations has become so connected over the last 5 to 10 years that it would be a shame if you didn't leverage that to your advantage. It's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
We know so much now about who our customers are and their behaviors and where they sit within our customer segmentation models and kind of where they're engaging within their customer journey that, if you can tap into that resource and use it to understand who to talk to and when, use it to enhance the kind of the meta understanding of who that person is, all that does on the back end is makes it's so much easier to understand the specific segmentation that you're looking at when somebody says something, so that you can start to get more granular in terms of how to approach a specific problem. And there's a lot of trends within technology I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, but the technology is there now that makes it really accessible for us to tap into these resources without having to call an IT administrator or call your Salesforce administrator and ask them what's going on in those systems. You can actually just start to leverage what's available to drive your programs to a different level of sophistication without adding a lot of complexity to how your actual technologies talk. So I think integrations are going to continue to be, one, a driver of a better understanding of who your customer is, where they are in that journey, and how that's impacting your ability to understand what they're telling you. And then on the back end of it, pushing that data back into the system. I mean, I know we've been talking about closed loop for years, right? It's been a concept of, everyone's always said collect, analyze, act, or collect your feedback, close the loop with your customer, make them feel valued and heard. And I think for a long time it was like a thank you note was that definition.
Thanks for taking our survey.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And maybe you throw them a coupon or you give them a discount code for something down the road. But we now have the ability to leverage technology to inform those operation systems on what to do next. So if somebody gives you feedback based on, a post contact center case close, and you can actually wire that feedback back into that contact center, that case management tool, to reopen a case when someone's not satisfied, and engage the team that's built to talk to customers about that experience and do some service mitigation there. You're just better arming your business to address a customer's need, and it's going to feel specific, and it's going to feel like you've really valued what your customers are saying. I've kind of said for years that if you want people to continue to participate in your feedback programs, you either need to buy or earn their feedback, right? Like they're basically giving you something, right? They're giving you their time, they're giving you their thoughts, and they need to feel like it's worth their time and energy to do so. And so if you can leverage that integration concept and drive that next best action to respond to the customer when they need it, they're going to feel like their time was valued in terms of giving you their feedback. And I think the third thing, and this is something I'm really proud about what we've done at Alchemer, is we've actually taken that integration concept one step further. Back to the prior subject of getting your budget scrutinized and your people kind of are really focused on what they're doing. You need to do more with your teams. And so what we've been able to do with our integration concept is start to listen to those systemic events in your Salesforce, in your CRM, inside your HCM, inside your contact center platform, and leverage the triggers that are driving those customer integrations to actually drive the autonomous delivery of your feedback. So if that case closes, we pull the case information in, and then we automatically send that out in a way that doesn't require your team to proactively engage in the distribution of feedback. So you kind of have this concept now where you can build these feedback systems that listen for something that's happening that's relevant to a customer, distribute the feedback to the customer in a specific way, know a bunch about who they are and what they're doing, and then feed it back into these operating systems so that people can actually take action using the systems and processes that drive their day-to-day jobs that they've been trained on, that you've built to specifically address a problem. So you can build these like really cool ecosystems of feedback without adding a lot of complexity and without adding, engineering or IT support.
One of my favorite customer stories around this that illustrates this, right, is that because you're getting the feedback, or you're asking for the feedback closer to the moment of interaction, right, closer to that moment in the customer journey, customers are more likely to respond and to provide, I think, more, maybe the feedback's richer and more complete because it's happened and it was such a short window of time they can actually remember and think specifically about the interaction. So I'm thinking about one of our online retail customers who implemented the workflow you're talking about, right? So like call center case closed, immediately triggers the survey from us. And when they, just by doing that automation, I think they saw their survey response rates go up like 30 or 40%.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Which is like, I mean, who doesn't want more feedback, right? Like, that's why this is the business of feedback, right? Like, this is what we all want.
Tens of thousands of new pieces of feedback.
Right? And because it is tied to that specific moment, right, in the journey, and it's not, in their inbox and they maybe respond to it 4 hours later, like, they can really think about, like, what was that interaction like, right? Which then, you're getting, again, that richer context of like, okay, I can tie this to an agent, I can tie this to a specific product problem, I can tie this to X, Y, and Z, right? And I think that having that context is so valuable. When we think about collection, right, the surveys we're sending out and how those are happening, not all of our customers are at a point in their journey where they're doing or workflow and automations make sense or integrations make sense. But at the core, everybody we work with is trying to collect feedback, right? So what are you thinking about in terms of trends for 2025 when it comes to collecting feedback? What do you see coming this year?
I think because of the technology limitations that we've dealt with for a long time, we've had to build a lot of complexity into how we think about building and deploying feedback, right? There's complexity in, okay, if I've only got 3 or 4 shots at engaging customers, I'm going to be very specific about the moment in time I'm going to go ask. And because I need to figure out something specific, I'm going to build complicated surveys that ask very specific, direct questions so I can try to get to the answer and to test my hypotheses. And then I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time and energy on the back end doing the analysis to prove my thesis. We're at a place now where I think a lot of the technology is liberating the fact that we don't need to be that specific because we can leverage tools like LLMs and AI to understand data in a different way. And again, back to that moment in time, it's if you can do these things in an autonomous way, you can set these systems up or these workflows up to just run. And I think what's been interesting is I spent a lot of time in contact center and shared service centers in my career. And one of the things that I've always said is a key driver of success for a long-term strategy for these centers is having a great service delivery structure that's focused on continuous improvement. And I think as CX continues to evolve, we don't need to be so focused on a moment in time or a specific project or a specific event, but we need to start thinking about our CX programs and how we're engaging our customers as a continuous improvement process. So put something out there, see how it works, get some feedback, understand where you need to pivot, and then because it's such a lightweight move now with a lot of especially with our technology to pivot to the next thing, maybe don't turn it off, but it's not as important in this moment in time, but now I'm going to focus on this one. So I'm going to go build another one of these systems here and I'm going to learn and then I'm going to continue to improve. I think the complexity is going to go from being specific in a moment in time to the complexity is going to show up in terms of how well can you adapt to an improvement mindset in terms of engaging your customers and deploying the things that need to happen to better improve their experiences.
I'm going to maybe say that back to you to make sure I've got it in that complexity's out and a simple approach to get to a bigger answer or a better answer maybe. Is that what I'm hearing? Or an opportunity to hey, maybe it's less complex in the execution, but then therefore you can do more where it might matter. Am I following?
Yeah, maybe instead of thinking about it as I've got 3 or 4 big things I'm doing, I actually need to back up a little bit and say I need to have 10 or 15 more in the moment things that matter that are being driven based on the actual experience interactions that are happening within your business. And again, I think, obviously going from 3 to 10 seems like we're just expanding the complexity, but I think if you put yourselves in the shoes of your customers, no one wants to take a 50-question survey that's going to take 40 minutes, right? We all know that.
Right.
What people want is they want to be able to share very specific feedback in the moment in a time frame that is respectful of their time. And so, again, what that's going to lead to is a kind of a little bit of an evolution from going to more of from a quantitative to a qualitative approach, and we're going to ask more open text questions in the moment, which is going to create a whole bunch of unstructured data, which in the past would have been a big problem because someone's going to have to read through and tag it. But I think that complexity we actually have to solve for now with LLM and AI technologies that can take that out. And so, again, I think it's the complexity is going, I don't need to make my methodology so complex in the moment in time. I can actually spread it out over a series of experiences and then go figure out what technology do you need to go understand what everybody is saying. And what you will find is you're going to create a balance of, just a really nice balance of respectfulness of your respondents and your customers. You're going to get a whole bunch of data that's really, really valuable. And then you've got technology that's going to help you make sense of it at scale and at pace so that you're actually able to be more nimble and faster to action, which will drive that revolution of continuous improvement mindsets within CX practitioners.
I was taking a note because I think you're actually talking about complexity in so many different, decreasing complexity or eliminating complexity in so many different areas, right? If we start at the basic survey, it's not the 50-question survey, now it's one question. Tell me about your experience. Right. Versus before I'd be did the agent solve your problem? Did they do it fast enough? Were you satisfied? Right? I'd ask 30 questions to understand how they actually truly felt. So my survey's getting, in many ways, right, less complex. Where I go capture that feedback is perhaps more places, but again, it's in some ways more simplified and streamlined, therefore less complex.
I was talking to a customer of ours last week, and one of the things we were talking about is they capture a whole bunch of open text, unstructured data. And one of the challenges that they're facing is they're like, well, sometimes it's hard for me to understand. And we ended up with an example of, if I asked you, of these 3 flavors of ice cream, what's your favorite? Chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry? Because I asked you a direct question, you're going to give me a direct answer.
Yeah,
you're going to
sure.
say chocolate.
Yeah.
Or vanilla. Or
I don't like any of those, but chocolate's I guess the one I like the most of the 3.
But if I asked you, what's your favorite dessert? You'll probably be like, I love cheesecake, right? And so the problem with not having a good balance of quantitative and direct questioning with open text and qualitative unstructured data is that you could be asking somebody a question that they're going to give you a direct answer to, but it's not actually what they feel. And so I think that's a good example of how we can take some of the complexity out of the way we think about building surveys and take some of the constraint off of how people respond by just asking them something as simple as, well, tell me, what did you think about your experience today? They'll tell you what they think. And it may be 10 lines, it might be 1 word, but you'll get exactly what that person's thinking without confining them to a specific answer.
I'm kind of going full circle here in that we started off by saying, hey, like there's sort of this big overarching theme for the year of how do I tie my program to business outcomes? How do I think about the total cost of ownership of my programs? This is a direct impact to that, right? Like if I in some ways remove some complexity and so I can do more or capture more things that are relevant across my organization, right? And I can do that in a way that's really easy. I can do more. My program's creating more value. That seems like a great thing to take back to my CFO to grow my budget and a great kind of point to that, again, TCO concept and how I address that.
I think one of the things that a lot of times in CX we tend to overlook is that we design customer experiences within a customer journey, and we've all got very nice documents and designs that show all of this. It may not be that clear to our customers that this is actually how we designed it. And so what's great about open text and taking that complexity out is it actually lets our customers tell us what they think in the moment of their interaction, not us forcing it on them. Which again, back to your point about how do we take things back to our CFOs, we need to understand as much as we can about that entire journey. And we need to be able to bring that data in from our operating systems to start to make sense of who it is, what the engagement looked like, what were the kind of impacts to the business that can go make, so that we can sit down and say, hey, we do have a survey that runs every time somebody returns our product, and we do know specifically about what that return looks like. But did you know that when we run our just general organization-wide CSAT survey, 30% of the surveys that are coming back, people are talking about returns.
Right.
And what you can start to do now is sit down with your FP&A partner and start to spread this data out a little bit, bring it back together, and then show how your customers think about the return process across the entire customer journey, which is going to give you the insights to who, when, and why are they worried about it. And if you can bring in the product information that they are returning, you can start to quantify, if I fix this product, I'm not only going to be able to sell more and keep more of my product out in market, but I'm also going to be able to reduce the cost of returns, because if I fix this product, I'm going to reduce my returns by 10% or something like that. And that's the language that your FP&A partner really wants to speak in. And that will help you prove the value of your CX program, help you retain and grow the budget that you want to spend, and start to show that being customer-centric is an important attribute for growing the business that goes beyond just a CSAT score, but it goes to the fact that now you can articulate what it's doing to the bottom line and driving profitability, for example, or growth within the business.
Okay, I love this. You've given us so many great things to watch for going into 2025, right? Around getting closer to our CFO and our FP&A partners, right? How we can use integrations to help us there, some ways to look at feedback collection and simplify. On future episodes of the Feedback of Business, we're going to dive into all those things. So I can't wait to see some of these predictions come true and look forward to having more discussions on this.
Awesome. This is great.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem.